Jax's revenge domain. I watched Jason Porter's mouth move, but the words hit me like a freight train. We're restructuring commissions for deals over $3 million, Brian. Yours drops to 1.5%. The $3.2 million contract I'd just closed, the biggest in company history, would now pay me $48,000 instead of $256,000. 22 years of loyalty, and this is what I got. My name is Brian Williams. I'm 49 years old, and I've been in enterprise software sales longer than most of these kids have been alive. Before I tell you how I made Jason and the whole company regret underestimating a veteran, let me back up and explain how we got here. I remember the day I hired Jason Porter like it was yesterday. 5 years ago, he walked into my office fresh out of Northwestern's business school, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Eager, smart, full of ideas about disrupting traditional sales models. The kind of kid who quoted Harvard Business Review articles in casual conversation. "Mr. Williams," he'd said, shaking my hand with that firm grip they teach you in business school, "I've studied your client retention numbers. Impressive. I'd love to learn from someone with your experience." I liked him immediately. Not because he was kissing up, hell, half the new hires tried that, but because he seemed genuinely interested in learning the business, not just collecting a paycheck while he figured out his next move. Those first 2 years, Jason was like a sponge. I taught him everything I knew about enterprise sales, how to read a client's body language during contract negotiations, when to push for a close and when to back off and let them think it over, how to build relationships that last decades, not just until the ink dries on the contract. "The software is just the excuse they use to meet with us," I told him during one of our lunch sessions. "What they're really buying is trust. They need to know that when their system goes down at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, someone who understands their business will answer the phone." Jason took notes on everything, asked smart questions, started closing deals that other senior reps couldn't touch. Within 18 months, he was outselling people who'd been here for 10 years. I was proud of him, proud like a father watching his son hit his first home run. I should have seen the warning signs when Nexus hired Richard Bradford as CEO 6 months ago. Bradford came from some Silicon Valley startup that had burned through $50 million in venture capital before folding. 38 years old, MBA from Stanford, the kind of guy who used phrases like synergistic optimization and disruptive market penetration in every sentence. His first company meeting was a masterclass in corporate buzzword bingo. "We're going to leverage our core competencies to maximize stakeholder value while optimizing our human capital allocation." Translation: "We're going to squeeze more work out of fewer people for less money." The real warning came when Bradford started promoting younger employees to strategic leadership positions. Jason got bumped up to VP of Sales Strategy, reporting directly to Bradford. Suddenly, the kid who used to ask me for advice on closing $500,000 deals was sitting in executive meetings, making decisions about commission structures and territory assignments. The change in Jason was gradual at first. Fewer lunch conversations about sales strategy, more time in conference rooms with PowerPoint presentations. When I'd stop by his new corner office, he'd be buried in spreadsheets, analyzing conversion rates and pipeline velocity metrics. "Everything okay?" I asked him one afternoon, noticing he looked stressed. "Just working on some optimization models for Bradford," he said without looking up from his laptop, "trying to identify inefficiencies in our compensation structure." That phrase, "inefficiencies in our compensation structure," should have set off every alarm bell in my head, but I was busy with my own projects. Specifically, the biggest deal of my career. Zenith Technologies had been on every software company's target list for 2 years. They were revolutionizing medical imaging with AI, and their CEO, Amanda Rodriguez, was known for being brilliant but impossible to impress. Zenith had chewed up and spat out sales teams from every one of our competitors. "Don't waste your time," Jason had told me when I first mentioned pursuing them. "Focus on clients we can actually land. Zenith's too big for anyone to handle solo." But that's where Jason's business school education failed him. He saw Zenith as a spreadsheet entry, a probability calculation. I saw them as people with real problems that needed real solutions. While other sales teams pitched them generic cost-saving and efficiency improvements, the same stuff everyone else was selling, I spent months researching what Zenith actually needed. HIPAA compliance across international boundaries, legacy system integration that wouldn't shut down, their operations for weeks during implementation, scalability solutions that could grow with their expanding AI capabilities. I talked to their mid-level managers, their IT department, even their administrative staff. I learned about their frustrations with current systems, their dreams for global expansion, the regulatory barriers preventing them from scaling into European markets. When I finally got my meeting with Amanda Rodriguez, I didn't pitch. I presented solutions to problems she hadn't even shared publicly yet. "You actually understand what we're trying to accomplish," she said, leaning forward across the conference table. "That's refreshing. Most salespeople just want to sell us what they have, not what we need." The negotiation took 4 months. Conference calls at 6 a.m. to accommodate their Singapore office, flying to Chicago 3 times to meet with their technical team. I even learned their project management software so I could speak their language during implementation, planning sessions. But when Amanda finally signed that $3.2 million contract, the largest deal in Nexus history, she told me something I'll never forget. "Brian, you're the first salesperson who treated us like partners instead of just another commission check." The commission should have been $256,000. After taxes, that was enough to cover my son Tommy's remaining college tuition, plus my wife Linda's ongoing physical therapy costs. She'd been dealing with chronic back problems since her car accident 2 years earlier, and good PT wasn't covered by our insurance. The morning after Zenith signed, I felt like I was walking on air. People who'd barely acknowledged me for months were suddenly my best friends. The company newsletter featured my deal on the front page. Bradford sent a company-wide email calling it a benchmark achievement in strategic client acquisition. I was already mentally spending that commission. Tommy's tuition bill was due in 6 weeks. Linda had found a specialist in Denver who might be able to help with her back problems, but the treatment wasn't cheap. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about money. That feeling lasted exactly 18 hours. Jason called me into his office the next morning. His office. That still felt strange. 6 months earlier, he was asking me for advice on handling difficult clients. Now he was sitting behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, wearing a suit that screamed executive track. "Brian, congratulations on Zenith. Really impressive work." His voice had that artificial warmth you hear from politicians during election season. The executive team is beyond impressed with the numbers. I settled into the chair across from his desk and waited. After 22 years in sales, you learn to wait for the real message. There's always a real message. As you know, we're always evaluating our compensation structures to ensure they're competitive and aligned with our growth strategy. He shuffled some papers without making eye contact. "Bradford has been working with our consultants on optimizing our commission framework to better reflect current market standards." That's when he said it. The words that changed everything. For deals exceeding $3 million, we're implementing a tiered structure. Your commission rate drops to 1.5%. The room seemed to tilt. $208,000 just vanished from my family's future. "That wasn't in my contract," I said, keeping my voice steady despite feeling like I'd been sucker punched. "It's a company-wide policy change, effective immediately." Jason finally looked up, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach turn. Not guilt or embarrassment, satisfaction. Think about it, Brian. $48,000 is still substantial compensation. Most people here would be thrilled with that kind of bonus. Most people here, the way he said it, like I should be grateful for scraps from the table I'd helped set. "Was this decision made before I closed Zenith?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jason cleared his throat, that nervous tick he'd had since business school. "The executive team has been discussing optimization strategies for several months. Bradford brought in McKinsey consultants to analyze our compensation structure. The timing with your deal is purely coincidental." Coincidental. Right. Like accidentally stepping on someone's foot versus deliberately stomping on their throat. "We're fortunate to have your institutional knowledge on the team, Brian." He was already turning back to his computer, dismissing me like a junior employee. "Your experience will be invaluable as we transition to this new framework." I sat there for a moment, watching this kid I'd taught everything he knew about sales treat me like I was lucky to still have a job. 22 years of building this company's client base, of staying late to take calls from customers in Tokyo, of missing Tommy's baseball games to close deals that kept Nexus profitable. And this was my reward. I stood up without another word and walked back to my desk. My hands were shaking as I sat down, not from fear, but from pure rage. The kind of anger that makes you want to punch holes in walls or flip over conference tables. Instead, I did what any experienced salesman does when he's been backed into a corner. I started calculating. The drive home that evening was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept running numbers in my head, trying to figure out how to tell Linda that our financial security had just evaporated. Tommy's tuition bill was $22,000 per semester. Linda's treatment in Denver would cost another $15,000. The vacation to Ireland she'd been planning for our 25th anniversary next year, forget about it. Linda was in the kitchen when I got home, making dinner and humming along to some old Beatles song on the radio. She looked up when I walked in, and I watched her expression change as she read my face. "What happened?" she asked. Turning down the music, I told her everything. About the commission cut, about Jason's attitude, about Bradford's optimization strategy that basically amounted to stealing from the people who actually generated revenue. Linda listened without interrupting, the way she'd done for 23 years of marriage. When I finished, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat down across from me at our kitchen table. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know. Fight it, I guess. Call a lawyer, see if they can legally change commission structures retroactively. And if they can." That was the question I'd been avoiding all afternoon. Then I spend the next 5 years working for people who think I'm expendable, making less money while they promote kids like Jason over me because they're strategic and innovative. Linda sipped her wine and studied my face. After 23 years, she could read me better than anyone. "Or?" she said. "Or what?" "Brian, you've been talking about going independent for 3 years. Every time some new hotshot gets promoted over you, every time they restructure territories or change commission plans, you mentioned starting your own consulting firm. Maybe this is the universe telling you it's time to stop talking and start doing." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running scenarios in my head. By 3 a.m., I'd made my decision. The next morning, I made some calls, not to lawyers or HR departments, but to people who mattered. Real relationships built over 2 decades in the industry. My first call was to Scott Thompson, my old colleague who'd left Nexus 2 years earlier to start his own systems integration firm. Scott had been the best technical architect I'd ever worked with, but Bradford's predecessor had passed him over for promotion 3 times in favor of younger candidates with shinier credentials. "Brian, good to hear from you. How's life in the corporate machine? Thinking about joining you on the outside. Actually, you got a minute to talk?" Scott's company, Thompson Systems, had grown to 12 employees in 2 years. Nothing spectacular, but profitable and sustainable. More importantly, Scott was working with clients who valued experience over PowerPoint presentations. "The market's hungry for consultants who actually know what they're doing," he told me over coffee that afternoon. "These Fortune 500 companies are tired of paying premium rates for junior staff from the big consulting firms. They want people who've actually implemented these systems before, not kids fresh out of MBA programs." My second call was to Ashley Morgan, a cybersecurity consultant I'd worked with on several deals. Ashley had left her corporate job at a major security firm when they tried to force her into a management role she didn't want. Now she was making twice what she'd earned as an employee, working with clients who appreciated her expertise. "The secret is specialization," Ashley explained when we met for lunch. "Don't try to be everything to everyone. Figure out what you do better than anyone else and become the go-to person for that specific thing." For me, that was enterprise software implementation for mid-market companies. The sweet spot between $500,000 and $3 million deals, where companies were too big for cookie-cutter solutions but too small to attract the attention of major consulting firms. My third call was to Rachel Davis, who'd been laid off in Nexus's last efficiency initiative despite being one of our best account managers. Rachel had been at the company for 8 years, consistently exceeded her quotas, and built genuine relationships with clients. But she was 47 years old in an industry that increasingly valued cultural fit over actual performance. "I've been doing some freelance work," Rachel told me when we met for drinks. "Nothing major, just helping smaller companies with their sales processes. But Brian, these companies are desperate for people who understand enterprise sales. They're tired of hiring 25-year-olds who think selling software is the same as selling shoes online." By the end of that week, I had the framework for Williams Strategic Consulting. Not some grandiose plan to take over the industry, just 4 experienced professionals who understood that enterprise software sales is about solving real problems for real people. The timing was perfect in a way that felt almost too good to be true. Zenith's implementation wasn't scheduled to begin for 6 weeks. Their contract with Nexus had a standard 30-day cancellation clause with prorated fees, something most clients never pay attention to, but every experienced salesperson knows by heart. I'd built the relationship with Amanda Rodriguez over 15 years, long before either of us was at our current companies. We'd met at industry conferences, served on panels together, even collaborated on a white paper about HIPAA compliance in AI-driven medical systems. The relationship existed, independent of any company loyalty. More importantly, I'd made Amanda a promise during our negotiations that I would personally oversee Zenith's implementation, not some junior team member, not a rotation of consultants, me, the person who understood their business well enough to solve problems they hadn't even identified yet. Bradford and Jason had just made it impossible for me to keep that promise while staying at Nexus. They'd given me the perfect excuse to walk away and take my biggest client with me, but I needed to be smart about it. Careful. One mistake and I'd be facing a lawsuit that would destroy any chance of building something on my own. That weekend, I locked myself in my home office and did what I should have done years earlier. I planned my exit strategy. Not an emotional departure, not a dramatic confrontation, but a calculated business decision executed with the same precision I'd used to close deals for the past 22 years. The first step was simple. I had to quit before Nexus realized what was happening. Monday morning, I walked into Nexus at 9 a.m. sharp, sat down at my desk, and typed up my resignation letter. 2 sentences. Please accept this as formal notice of my resignation, effective immediately. I will not be requiring a reference. I hit send to HR, CCING, Bradford, and Jason. Then I called Amanda Rodriguez. Amanda, it's Brian Williams. Any chance you're free for coffee this morning? Something's come up with your implementation that we need to discuss. She was quiet for a moment. Amanda didn't do small talk, especially not urgent coffee meetings. How urgent are we talking? Let's just say your project timeline might be in jeopardy. Starbucks on Michigan Avenue, 10:30. This better be important, Brian. Amanda was already there when I arrived, dressed in her usual sharp business attire, typing rapidly on her laptop. She looked up when I sat down, her expression unreadable. Talk, she said, closing the laptop. Nexus is planning to assign a junior team to your implementation. I've been moved to a different division. This was a carefully constructed truth. I was indeed moving myself to a very different division, one that didn't exist yet. Her jaw tightened. That's not what we agreed to, Brian. Your personal involvement was a key factor in our decision to sign with Nexus. I know. That's why I wanted to meet face to face. I slid my newly printed business card across the table. I'm starting my own consulting firm. Williams Strategic specializes in exactly what Zenith needs. Amanda picked up the card, studied it. This is highly irregular. So is bait and switch staffing on a $3.2 million contract. I leaned forward. Amanda, you didn't sign with Nexus because of their brand name or their marketing materials. You signed because we spent months building a solution that actually addresses your specific challenges. Do you really think anyone else there has that same understanding of your business? She was quiet for a long moment, turning the business card over in her fingers. What exactly are you proposing? Your contract with Nexus has a 30-day cancellation clause. You haven't made your first payment yet. Cancel with them. Hire Williams Strategic for 15% less than what you agreed to pay Nexus. You get the same expertise, save almost $480,000, and work directly with the team that actually understands your needs. And you get what? Revenge? I smiled. I get to build something that can't be restructured or optimized away by the next hotshot MBA. And yes, I get the satisfaction of showing Jason Porter what happens when you underestimate someone with 22 years of experience. Amanda leaned back in her chair, studying my face. You know what I've always respected about you, Brian? You're just as strategic as you are honest. Most salespeople are one or the other, never both. She slipped the card into her jacket pocket. Send me a proposal by end of business today. Make it compelling enough that my board will approve it without hesitation. I stood up from that coffee meeting with my heart pounding and my hands steady for the first time since Jason's commission announcement. I wasn't just another middle-aged employee swallowing his pride and moving on. I was about to show these kids what real business execution looked like. The proposal took me 14 straight hours. I didn't eat lunch, barely took bathroom breaks, just wrote and rewrote until every word was perfect. I outlined a 3-phase implementation plan that would not only save Zenith money, but deliver better results than what Nexus had promised. By 8 p.m., I'd also formalized agreements with Scott, Ashley, and Rachel. Williams Strategic Consulting wasn't just Brian Harrison trying to freelance his way to financial stability. It was 4 proven professionals who'd been undervalued and overlooked by corporate America, ready to prove that experience trumps youth when it comes to solving real business problems. I hit send on Amanda's proposal at 11:47 p.m., then collapsed into bed with Linda, who'd been bringing me coffee and sandwiches all day without asking questions. "How do you feel?" she asked, curled up next to me in the dark. "Terrified," I admitted. "But good terrified. Like standing at the edge of a high dive, knowing you're about to do something that changes everything." My phone buzzed at 6:15 a.m. with a text from Amanda. "Board meeting in 2 hours. Your proposal is strong. 2 questions. How do I know you can deliver without Nexus's resources? And what about data security protocols?" I was ready for both questions. First, Nexus outsources implementation to the same contractors I've worked with for years. I've already confirmed availability with 3 key specialists. Second, Ashley Morgan brings cybersecurity expertise that exceeds what Nexus offered. Her firm just landed certification that Nexus is still pursuing. Amanda's response came 20 minutes later. "Impressive. Sending contract to legal for review. Assuming they approve, we're moving forward with Williams Strategic." I sat on my kitchen floor and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope that I could build something that belonged to me, something that couldn't be taken away by corporate restructuring or MBA consultants. That feeling lasted about 3 hours. At 11:30 a.m., Jason appeared at my old desk, his face flushed red above his expensive shirt collar. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, loud enough that heads turned throughout the office. "I resigned," I said calmly, continuing to pack my few personal items into a cardboard box. "I believe HR sent you a copy of my letter. You can't just walk away with our biggest client. I didn't walk away with anyone. Zenith made an independent business decision based on what's best for their company. Isn't that what you and Bradford taught me about market-driven optimization?" His eyes narrowed. The non-compete agreement doesn't apply to relationships that existed before my employment here. I stood up, box in hand. I met Amanda at the Tech Connect conference in 2019, 2 years before she joined Zenith. Everything's documented. I'd done my homework, spent Sunday afternoon digging through old conference materials, business cards, LinkedIn connections. The paper trail was bulletproof. "You think you can compete with Nexus? You're one person with a laptop. Actually, I'm 4 experienced professionals with a combined 75 years of industry knowledge. But thanks for the vote of confidence." I headed toward the elevator, Jason following behind like an angry puppy. "Bradford will destroy you in court. Maybe. Or maybe Bradford will realize that pursuing a legal battle against someone who can document systemic age discrimination might not be the best PR strategy for a company already struggling with retention." The elevator doors opened. As I stepped inside, I turned back to face Jason one last time. "Here's some free advice. From your old mentor, clients follow trust, not org charts. You might want to remember that when you're explaining to Bradford how you lost our biggest account." The doors closed on Jason's stunned expression, and I walked out of Nexus headquarters knowing I'd never be back. The next 6 months were simultaneously the hardest and most rewarding of my career. Williams Strategic operated out of my home office until we could afford real space. My dining room table became our conference room. Linda got used to finding Scott, Ashley, and Rachel camped out in our kitchen at all hours, laptops spread across every surface, working through implementation challenges and client presentations. Zenith's implementation launched exactly on schedule. Better than on schedule, actually. We delivered 3 weeks early and $50,000 under budget. The AI integration that Nexus had estimated would take 6 months took us 4, mainly because we didn't have to waste time on corporate bureaucracy and approval processes. Amanda called me personally when they ran their first full-scale test. "Brian, I don't know what kind of magic you people are working, but our processing time just dropped by 40%. The board is asking if we can accelerate the Phase 2 rollout." Word spread the way it does in any tight industry. slowly at first, then faster as results became impossible to ignore. When you successfully implement a complex AI-driven medical imaging system for a company like Zenith, other companies notice. More importantly, other CEOs start asking questions. Our second client came from Amanda's network. MedTech Solutions, a smaller company developing diagnostic equipment, needed HIPAA-compliant cloud infrastructure. The kind of project that big consulting firms would staff with junior associates and bill at premium rates. We handled it with Ashley's security expertise and Scott's systems knowledge, delivered in 8 weeks instead of the projected 12. Client 3 was a referral from Scott's previous work. Manufacturing company upgrading their entire ERP system while maintaining 24/7 production schedules. The kind of challenge that requires real-world experience, not textbook theories. By month 6, Williams Strategic had landed 7 clients and generated $1.2 million in revenue. Not Silicon Valley unicorn numbers, but real sustainable business built on solving actual problems for actual companies. We moved into a real office. Nothing fancy, but a space where we could meet clients without apologizing for the dog barking or Linda's book club meeting in the living room. More importantly, we were building something that couldn't be restructured or optimized away by the next management consultant with a PowerPoint presentation. The best part was watching my team grow into their roles. Rachel turned out to be a natural at client relationship management, the kind of person who remembered birthdays and anniversaries, who could smooth over implementation hiccups before they became real problems. Scott's technical expertise finally got the recognition it deserved. Clients specifically requested him for complex integration projects. Ashley built our cybersecurity practice into something that attracted Fortune 500 companies looking for real expertise instead of compliance theater. But what really made it work was something you can't teach in business school. We genuinely cared about our clients' success. When Zenith's Singapore office had integration problems at 2 a.m. their time, I was on the phone walking their IT director through solutions. When MedTech's CEO needed regulatory guidance for their European expansion, Ashley spent her weekend researching GDPR compliance requirements. We weren't just vendors, we were partners who understood that our success depended on our clients' success. The news about Jason came from my old cubicle neighbor, Sarah Martinez, over drinks about 8 months after I'd left Nexus. You probably haven't heard, she said, clearly enjoying being the bearer of dramatic news. But Jason got demoted last month. I nearly choked on my beer. Demoted? Not fired? Worse. Bradford moved him to strategic partnerships, which is corporate speak for, we can't fire you yet, but you're never making real decisions again. She leaned forward. After you left with Zenith, 3 more enterprise clients decided not to renew their contracts. Word got around that Nexus was reassigning experienced account managers to junior staff. The damage went beyond just lost revenue. Sarah told me that Nexus's reputation in the industry had taken a serious hit. Companies talked to each other, especially in specialized markets like enterprise software. When word spread that Nexus was pulling experienced staff off major implementations to cut costs, potential clients started asking uncomfortable questions during sales meetings. Bradford brought in McKinsey again to figure out what went wrong, Sarah continued. Their recommendation? Hire back experienced senior staff and stop trying to optimize away institutional knowledge. Cost them more in consulting fees than they saved on commission restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to save money by cutting experienced salespeople's commissions, they'd created exactly the kind of brain drain that requires expensive consultants to fix. But the real validation came a year later, when Tommy graduated college debt-free and Linda finished her physical therapy program in Denver. We could afford both because Williams Strategic wasn't just surviving. We were thriving. On the anniversary of my resignation from Nexus, I sat in my corner office looking out at the city skyline, thinking about everything that had changed. We'd grown to 12 employees, landed 18 clients, and generated $2.1 million in revenue. But more than the numbers, we'd built something that reflected our values: fair compensation, respect for experience, and the understanding that long-term relationships matter more than short-term profits. Linda knocked on my office door that afternoon, holding 2 cups of coffee and smiling. "Any regrets?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. I thought about Jason, probably sitting in some windowless office handling strategic partnerships that nobody cared about. About Bradford, still trying to figure out how to replace institutional knowledge with spreadsheet optimization. About all the other experienced professionals who are being pushed aside by companies that confused youth with innovation. Only one, I said. I should have done this years ago. The truth is, what happened at Nexus wasn't really about the money. It was about respect, about being valued for what you bring to the table instead of being seen as an expense to be optimized. In trying to save a few $100,000 on commissions, they'd lost millions in revenue and created their strongest competition. If you're reading this and you're dealing with some young executive who thinks your experience is outdated, remember something: they need us more than we need them. The business world is full of people who can create PowerPoint presentations and quote Harvard Business Review articles. What it lacks is people who understand that behind every enterprise software deal is a human being trying to solve real problems for their company. Experience isn't just about knowing how to close deals. It's about understanding that relationships matter, that trust takes time to build but seconds to destroy, and that sometimes the best business decision is the one that prioritizes long-term value over short-term profits. 22 years taught me that loyalty goes both ways, that expertise has value that can't be calculated on a spreadsheet, and that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply proving you were right all along. We just have to be willing to bet on ourselves. The companies that survive and thrive are the ones that understand experience isn't a liability to be optimized away. It's an asset to be leveraged. Sometimes the greatest act of professional self-respect is walking away from a table where you're no longer valued and building your own table where experience sits at the head.